AskReddit by Pat Color. Bilingual people, what is a thing that non-bilingual will never understand? The fact that I no longer translate in my head when I use my second language. The fact that I can be unaware which language I am reading. I have a bit of a stutter in one language but not the other. Jokes that work in both languages are the funniest. Ever laughed because a word in someone else's joke sounds like a different word with another context in your second, third language and you're giggling at the wrong part and they look at you like you're crazy? Literal translations rarely work. A lot of monolingual people seem to think other languages are like their language but with other words, and every word as an equivalent. Yes. Recently I was trying to explain to someone that I had fainted but could only remember the French expression and told them that I had fallen into apples. Confusion all around. Having an accent regardless of which language you are speaking. Edit. Learning a language allows you to feel better understood as we interact and build connections with others. So it's frustrating when you feel as though you're not communicating as clearly as you would like to express yourself. It's been great to feel understood. I've enjoyed reading through the comments and learning that there's a lot of people that are actively becoming multicultural. Yes. I have lived in the US for a very long time before traveling back to my country of birth. I was shocked when my old friends told me at our reunion that I had an accent when I spoke my native language. The accent disappeared after several days of me being in the environment where I only used my native language, but it was a shocking realization to me that I had an accent in the language that was native to me. Translating is a whole different skill than speaking another language. When I first learnt English, I would translate things in my head to understand them. As I became fluent, I stopped doing that because I didn't need to. When someone speaks to me in English, I don't translate stuff in my head back to French to understand them. I just automatically understand it. Cute if someone speaks English, and another person doesn't, and ask me, hey, can you translate what he said ? I completely suck at it. I can ultimately do it but it means I need to take what was said in English, and reprocess it in French and find the most adequate words for translation, and it's honestly not that easy to do. Yes. It's never word for word. And it's not just that there's not a word to match a word in the other language, it's that the whole way of formulating and expressing things is different. That the way language is constructed is not straightforward. It's not just a different set of words and rules of grammar, it's kind of a whole different way of processing thoughts into speech. This is exactly why the movie Arrival and the short story behind it are so fascinating to me. Really puts what you said into perspective. Highly recommend if you haven't seen it. Real-time translation takes a lot of mental energy. Interpreting is incredibly exhausting. Professional interpreters are required to take frequent breaks. Forgetting words from your native language if you are using the second language too much. I have lost count of how many times I knew what I wanted to say in any other language, yet I forgot how to say it on my own native language. I end up remembering them later on anyways, but it is such an embarrassing feeling. Edit. Also, another little thing. Accidentally switching languages in the middle of a conversation. I may be talking to someone in English, and when I didn't understand something, I would be like "QU. What?" in Spanish, all without even thinking about what I did until I realized that I spoke in Spanish by mistake. It's not really common for it to happen, but I do remember each and every single time it does. Yeah, or like reading something in your second language and knowing what it means but being unable to translate it. Speaking two languages at the same time. Usually because you forget certain words in one language but remember it in the other, or because a word is easier to say. JNR your Q9 day, what the fuck you're talking about? I had a weird kind of version of this. I had taken French for several years, as had my roommate in college, so we used French in the dorm to help maintain our ability to use it. But I later took Mandarin as an elective, and during an oral exam, I realized my teacher was looking at me with a very confused expression. I had switched to French during the exam, and while she spoke both Mandarin and English, she didn't understand a word of French. My brain had just switched to French because not English was kind of jumbled up together and I was way more comfortable in French. Brain fog, when asked to translate, at a critical vocabulary moment. You need that one word to make the perfect translation. But it is not there. The difference between the lightning bug and the lightning strike. When some word only comes to mind in another language, and you just can't remember what that word is in your native tongue. I heard about Dutch PPL not being able to remember a word in Dutch but being able to think of it in German and then getting super frustrated, only to realize that it's the same word in Dutch, which I think is the pinnacle of this phenomenon. I am bilingual but in two very unrelated languages, so I don't have this issue. You have different personalities based on the language you're currently speaking, and your native language has emotional ties that aren't always present in other spoken languages. You have two senses of humor. You know which joke will be funny in which culture, and which jokes will translate and which won't. That feeling that you're not conveying your emotions correctly when speaking. It's like knowing a better word to describe them in your native language and not finding a proper equivalent in the one being spoken. Yup, so you just add words like very to mimic the right emotion. When you want to say something you have the precise expression for in another language than the one you're just speaking in. Edit. 9k imaginary internet points. Dathuk. This is the origin of the phrase pardon my French. It has nothing to do with being vulgar. The struggle of explaining understanding sayings. Americans use a lot of sayings like let's play it by ear, and in Spanish we also have sayings that don't quite translate. Also when I'm too excited, angry etc, my brain switches to my native language and can't quite express myself correctly the other language. Watching or reading something, a film, series or book, in its original language is just much better. A side effect of this is that I cannot watch dubbed films and shows anymore. It feels so wrong in that I'm watching a fake version of it. If I don't know the language I'd rather read subtitles. I'm more comfortable explaining how I feel using my second language. It feels so wrong and awkward doing it with my native language. Yes. Saying emotional or corner things in a second language is way easier for me too. There's some detachment and lack of weight. Forgetting a word in every language that you know lol. Empathy for non-native speakers trying to learn your language. On the other hand, I have seen native speakers criticize the way someone speaks a second language whilst they themselves are struggling with a second language. People are fucking weird. Trying to communicate while drunk and instead spouting a bastard chimera sentence that has words from 3 languages but the grammar of none. Deleted. The sheer smug joy of other people not realizing you speak a second language, having them speak rudely about you in that language and then the look on their face as you respond to them in that language. I'm Canadian and come from a very English background with a very English name and no trace of an accent but can speak French and a bit of Italian. Working customer service jobs, the amount of people who lip off in French is too high to count at this point. That moment of realization when I complete a transaction in French after they have been shit talking me is great. I was on a class trip to London and there was a group from Senegal, who got mixed in with us and a group of Chinese students for group work. Every task, they started talking in French, mocking our previous answers and accents or stuff. It was a long time ago, and then getting an answer to share. Then I chirped into their discussion. You are more comfortable arguing in one language than the other, and involuntarily shift to that language mid-argument. So true. I used to be able to argue only in German. But after living in other countries for over a decade I start the argument in German, then switch to English when I'm emotional, and end up swearing in Dutch when I'm mad. A second language. Edit. The dictionary defines bilingual as someone who speaks two languages fluently, not only exactly two languages. So yes, people who speak more than two languages still fall under the bilingual definition. Now listen here, you little shit. Say something in other language is annoying as fuck. Whenever someone did that to me, I just started to recite a humorous poem in German. It's easier if you have a preset answer to that instead of trying to find something to say. But I agree, it is annoying. How much fun it is. So I speak Dutch as a native language. My English is really good, my German is normal, and I also speak a bit of Swiss German. Believe me, that's a big difference. So a friend of mine is from Switzerland. She also speaks all those languages, and even more. When we are talking, I ask something in Dutch, she answers in English, and I reply in German. When we have a couple of beers, the language can change mid-sentence. We already had a couple of times people asking which language we were speaking. So yeah, that's quite fun. Not remembering in what language you read all isn't something, even if it was like a couple of hours ago, it just doesn't matter anymore. I often catch this feeling after listening to podcasts. The inexplicable urge to shoot yourself when you're talking to someone in a language and can't remember a word in that language, but you can in the others you know. Related to this, the amazing feeling when you are talking to another bilingual person who speaks the same languages as you, and being able to freely switch between languages and words, according to which match the best for the situation. 1. Dumb puns and add jokes when the languages combine. 2. Some languages have the same word but different meaning, can lead to another potential joke or confusion. Looking for a word in your native language but knowing it in your second language makes you feel like you've lost some of your native language, lol. IDK, if normal people know this, but something I realized is that not everything translates word for word, and sometimes there are just words that don't have a translation in your original language. I just downloaded an obscure, for Anglophones, French film and was very frustrated that the subtitles were a one translation rather than just using English phrasing. Completely incomprehensible. That languages are lazy. I am a polyglot from a family of polyglots. No matter what the conversation is and whatever mishmash of words from whatever languages we are speaking, we always default to the easiest way to say something in a language. So we can be busting through a mix of French, German, and Polish. But the word for why will always be in English no matter what. Because in the other three languages it's at least 2 syllables and in Polish it's 3. If you want to see real time how languages evolve, just sit at a table with polyglots as they hash out what they want to say. It's the idea of this is what humanity from XX region will sound like in XX years from intermingling sort of thing. The monosyllabic nature of Y has been a long-standing problem for movie TV dubbing, considering how often Y is used as a sentence on its own. It very clearly doesn't match the mouth movements in most other languages.